LinkedIn, we have a huge library of online learning courses. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but we're actually owned by Microsoft.
Welcome to IDP Real Talk, where we discuss real stories, real experiences, and what it's really like to be living in Australia. Today I have with me the amazing Angus.
Thanks so much for having me on, Prachi.
I am really excited to have you on because I am obsessed with LinkedIn. And I feel like one of the most frequently questions that students ask us is like, how do we use LinkedIn? And do we even need LinkedIn? And how do we use LinkedIn to land a job in Australia? So we'll be talking about all of that stuff. But just before we dive in, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hopefully we can answer some of those questions and we can impart a little bit of information about how people do leverage LinkedIn. But yeah, so I'm Angus. I'm an account director. I've been at LinkedIn coming up to about 4.5 years now. My role specifically is helping companies all over Australia leverage LinkedIn to help find jobs and help people find their sort of dream gig. But outside of work, I've actually just become a dad. So I'm a new dad of 6 months to a little boy called Fox. And yeah, I'm a mad keen golfer, although I don't really play as much as I would like to. But I'm excited to be here. So hopefully I can share a few stories about how you can use LinkedIn.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I feel like students really do need to know how to use LinkedIn, but also I was chatting with you earlier and I'm like, students might not even know that they need to be on LinkedIn. I feel like that's one area for sure that we need to cover, but also some students who are on LinkedIn might be really hesitant to post or engage with LinkedIn, have a network on LinkedIn. So diving right in, how crucial do you think is having that active LinkedIn profile when looking for a job?
I mean, very biased, but I think it's really critical, especially in this day and age. But I think maybe even just pairing it back for those who maybe don't use LinkedIn at all. LinkedIn's actually been around 20 years, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. It started in 2003. So how it started was just a simple way for our then founder, a guy called Reid Hoffman, to really just keep track and establish what was, at that time, one of the first professional networks based in Silicon Valley. And over time, it just grew and grew and grew. And in 2009, LinkedIn, we had our then CEO come up with this like amazing vision about what LinkedIn could be. And it was all around creating economic opportunity for every single member of the global workforce. And at that time, I think we had about 100 million people using the platform. And fast forwarding to today, we've got 950 million members on LinkedIn who use us every single day to come on and connect to what we call opportunity. But really, that's to connect to other professionals all over the globe, particularly here in Australia with about 12 million members. And I think for anybody who is maybe studying or finishing their degree, LinkedIn offers this awesome opportunity to just understand what maybe's next. And I think for students out there who don't have a profile or who maybe are a bit scared to jump on because they don't necessarily have a job or they don't have a job that they think is professional, I'd encourage you just to explore it, because what you'll find on LinkedIn is companies all over Australia talking about what they do, what kind of opportunities exist for them. And for students, which is our fastest growing segment, it's an amazing opportunity to find out about grad programs. It's an amazing opportunity to find out about what jobs exist out there. And given the way the world is moving, with a lot of companies hiring not just on job titles, but really promoting that they are after certain skills, it's a great time to really understand, well, what's next for me? And LinkedIn's a really great way to find that kind of information.
100%. I totally agree with you. And I always encourage students, whenever I do meet some, you need to be on LinkedIn and you need to create a network and also engage with other people, peers, and also create content when you feel comfortable, for sure. The second question I have for you is, how can students optimize their LinkedIn profile? What is it that they must do to have their profile ready so that they can stand out?
Great question. And I think the best advice that I give students, or anyone really, when it comes to specifically how can you stand out, is really try and be authentic. And again, coming back to students who don't necessarily have any jobs, but all of them, or you might be studying, you might not be, you've certainly got some skills and you've certainly got some experiences that'll really shine through on your profile. So think about someone's experience with LinkedIn. For those of you who don't have it, essentially I'm looking at what is a glimpse into who you are as a person, not just an online resume of facts and figures and like some really simple sort of language around I work with customers and things like that. Doesn't really mean too much. But for students who are talking about how, as part of their degree, they've been able to translate, scientific papers into layman's words and, really be able to communicate complex ideas in a simple manner, that's really powerful. That's a really powerful skill. And so as part of that skills sections on your profile, highlight those kinds of stories. And then a lot of you have made the jump, have moved to Australia, and that might seem like something that's not really relevant to a LinkedIn profile, but the amount of skills that you've picked up by throwing yourself into a completely new world is incredible. And there's some stories in there that you can really share to your network. And then in terms of maybe some different ways to stand out, the best place to start is have a profile picture. It's who you are. Don't post about yourself or show a photo of yourself at your cousin's wedding and maybe your tux and things like that. But maybe just like, your T-shirt and whatever it is that is a professional reflection of you. And I think something else that I've had to change a couple of times just over the last few years about my sort of personal summary about myself. I think we all get a little bit scared when we have to talk about ourselves, and it is really frightening and you're not really sure what to post and what not really to share. Talk about your passions. Talk about what you're interested in. Talk about what you would like to do in a job. And for an example, I actually have a neuroscience background and have somehow found my way working for LinkedIn. I talk about that. I talk about how I'm really interested in behavioral science. I'm really interested in neurodiversity. And now through my career, I've been able to meet all these incredible people. And I talk about that. That's what makes me tick. And so for anybody, any future employers or anybody who works with me, both internally at LinkedIn and externally with my clients, they get to really know who I am. So the first time that they meet me for the first time, not only do they know what I look like, so the mustache doesn't scare them, but they really understand. It's like, this is what makes Angus tick, and maybe this is somewhere where we connect.
I feel like you've covered a lot of hidden gems there. Students who come to a new country, they're starting new, they have their unique stories to share. So
Absolutely.
That's being authentic, sharing that sort of information with their network. Love that. Profile picture, their professional photo, that's much needed. That's the first impression anybody ever gets of them when they're looking at their profile. Next one is the About Me section, which needs to have all this interesting information about them and not be so clinical about it. It's so funny. I actually spoke to a recruiter. So I was like, Elise O'Brien from Project Level Up. And I said, Elise, what is it that stands out for you when looking and scouting for talent international students on LinkedIn? So she said, very similar to yours. In your About section, mention a short summary of your work experience. And if you don't have work experience, talk about the projects that you've been involved with, your passion, what motivates you, like you said. Add a link to your portfolio. Always works. If you don't have a portfolio, try making one. That's always a good idea. And also, she looks at if you're active, if you're engaged, what motivates you in your network, something that demonstrates that you're engaged. So that's definitely something that I have to mention. And this is from a recruiter's point of view. So coming to my next question, what actionable tips or advice would you offer to international students to make the most out of their profiles? What would be like your key focus areas?
Absolutely. And I think that's excellent advice. And I think if you can pick up on some of those, it's a really, really good place to start. But anybody who's ever asked me, how can I leverage LinkedIn or how can I use LinkedIn to find a job, is twofold. The first one is on your profile, have to have a profile picture. It just means the connection requests and things like that, messages and all the really cool stuff that happens when you're really engaged on LinkedIn starts to skyrocket. So it's a great place to start. As part of your About section, a great summary of any work experience, the projects. I'd just maybe change that language a little bit, and as part of the story, maybe share some stories of how you've had an impact. A lot of graduates that I've seen hired, who don't have any work experience, who are new to cities that they've just moved to, they share stories about, community organisations they've been a part of, maybe groups they've been a part of, societies they've been a part of at universities. They've maybe had to pitch for budgets. They've maybe had to public speak at certain events. And someone who's throwing themselves out there, it's really, really cool. Now, it's impossible for me to find that information unless you share it, unless you put it on your profile. I can't glean that information if it's just Angus McAvaney, LinkedIn account director. To be honest, it's super boring. There's a lot of account directors out there. I've got to be able to stand out. And then working your way through, you might not have work experience, or you might not feel like you should be sharing that information. You know, you might have a retail job. But my first job was at Officeworks, and to this day, it's one of my favorite jobs. It's where I learned how to manage people for the first time. And when I was talking about it with my manager, actually, he talked about how that experience of retail is something he looks for in people because, you know, you're dealing with customers. It's sometimes a bit difficult. Those challenges that you might think aren't that relevant are actually super relevant. But moving to, I guess, how can you leverage your LinkedIn profile to grab or to find a job? I think something that you need to do is you need to find out who you might want to actually work for. And everyone I talk to about this, I always come up with a top 10 list, top 20 list. You might not know who the companies are that you might want to work for, but you'll have a bit of an understanding. Personally, like the dream sort of job might be something like a YouTube or a Google, because I've heard stories about just how incredible they are. And to anybody LinkedIn listening to this, I do love LinkedIn. It's a fantastic place. But all these stories, they're out there on LinkedIn. And then I think when it comes to actually finding that job, and I don't want to preempt any questions you've got, Prachi, it's then up to you. And I think a really important thing to understand when it comes to LinkedIn and trying to leverage it for a job is that you need to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And I think what might happen, IDP might have a graduate job and they might post it, and, you know, an international student listening to this might go, oh, great, and apply. And that's where it stops for them. And I have to strongly encourage that student to don't stop there. And you can't stop there because you're one of many. And if your profile only just has your name and your Bachelor of Science or Master of Commerce or whatever it might be, there's nothing else for that person to then go on and glean out of a list of 50, 100, 150 or whatever it is. You need to start telling that story. You need to be front and center. And it's extremely uncomfortable to try and put yourself out there. But you're also really junior enough that you can just be curious and you can reach out to someone who's maybe names on that job and be like, hey, look, I've just applied. What would make me stand out? It's a very fair question. It's a really nice question. Also shows that recruiter you're really engaged, as Lisa said, I think it was. Mm-hmm. It's a really powerful thing that you can do.
Absolutely. I love that. And I feel like students would be like, wow, I didn't even know I could do that. You know, like I don't think that they would have thought that far ahead. It's not as simple as just clicking on apply, but it is about building that online presence on LinkedIn and having, you know, the courage to think about the next step, which is reaching out to your recruiter and saying, hey, what will make me stand out? So that's big and that's massive.
Yeah, and I think on that one, I met this wonderful woman up in Sydney at an IDP event, and she was from Turkey, and she told this incredible story of when she moved to Australia in 2012. She had a mechanical engineering degree from a university that wasn't recognised here in Australia. English, as she described herself, wasn't her strong suit. And she was really struggling because the only job she could get on the weekend was just working at a pub, working behind bars and things like that. So not really what she wanted to do, considering how highly educated she was. And someone introduced her to LinkedIn at the time and said, well, why don't you try this platform? It's this network. It's based in Australia. At that time, I think we had about like 6 or 7 million members, something like that, maybe not as many. And she's the one who actually taught me this, because there's actually a limit on the amount of messages you can send people on LinkedIn. And she told me she sent 991 messages to mechanical engineers all over Australia, because you can search for them on LinkedIn. You can search for people's profiles.
Wow.
She sent 991 messages because she didn't have a network. She didn't know anyone. She didn't know what companies were out there. She didn't know anything, but she knew she had to put herself forward. Now, again, remember, this is someone with a mechanical engineering degree who has not recognised here in Australia, who English is not a strong suit, has zero network, and is working on I think at that time, a visa that probably didn't allow her to work. She sent all these messages. 100 people came back saying, thank you so much for reaching out, but unfortunately, not the right time to meet. 10 people, though, asked to meet her. From those 10 people, she went and had a coffee with them. 5 of them put her forward for a job, and she got 3 job offers off the back of that person. And it's the most powerful story. She's still now working for a very, very large construction firm here in Australia. And she credits it all to LinkedIn. Without that network, without her putting herself forward, being in front of people, It's hard work, don't get me wrong. That's a lot of messages that you need to send. It's a lot of impact. It's a lot of story sharing and, a lot of no's. But for her, it changed the trajectory of what she wanted to do. It meant that she could stay in Sydney. It meant she could build a life for herself. And yeah, it's an incredible story. And that's one of thousands that I've heard, let alone all the ones that people have used LinkedIn for. It's really, really cool.
I love that story, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I actually found my first paid gig through LinkedIn. I reached out to a recruiter on LinkedIn who was working at catch.com.au at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, would love to know if you guys have any internship opportunities. This was not an ad. This is not something, and I just reached out to her, and she, I'm not going to take names, but she was so nice about it. She actually called me in for an interview, and that's how I got my first paid internship, which was massive for a student back then.
Huge.
And I feel like I have so much to thank LinkedIn for sure. And I feel like this has definitely covered the next question, which is on effectively networking with professionals. And, a lot of the times, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but a lot of the times students would be, or anybody on LinkedIn would be like, should I connect with a person that I haven't met?
Yeah.
I do.
I do. I absolutely do. But there's a right way and a wrong way. I think, I work for LinkedIn, so there's definitely a visibility element that I have as working for the company. But I accept everyone who reaches out to me. But that's, part and parcel of my job. But for a long time, I didn't. But I think those people who reach out and they go, hey, Angus, see you working for LinkedIn. I'd love to connect. And I'm interested to learn if there's anybody in your network who is interested in whatever it might be. That person's just taken an extra couple of seconds, personalized that message, actually read my profile. And, it's tough. Don't get me wrong. It takes time, but it's something so small that actually means a lot. And as part of my job, I network with people all day and every day. It's part of my gig here at LinkedIn. But you might think it's a bit easier because I do work for LinkedIn, and sure, there is definitely that angle there as well. But if I don't personalize that message and maybe give that reason to engage, give that person, a reason to engage with me, they don't come back. They don't talk to me. But yeah, the amount of times I've done speaking events, the amount of times I've met and put myself out there offering a lot of people help. Not many people take it up. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a real opportunity that people reach out because there's a lot of exceptionally nice people out there who have a story like yours who, got their leg up through someone else's help. And I'm sure you would help someone because someone else helped you. And that's kind of how it works. And time and time again, it happens. So if you can, when you are reaching out to people, yes, you might be reaching out to someone who has nothing in common with you. But like that lady from Turkey, she wanted to be a mechanical engineer. Who better to talk to than mechanical engineers based here in Australia? She wanted to be one. She wanted to learn a little bit more about how they found their job, how they got into the network, how they landed there. They're curious. She was genuinely curious. And people like that. And people want to share. People want to help. So in terms of networking, especially for those of you who are students, which I imagine a lot of you are, that curiosity and that genuine curiosity, not can you help me? It's I'm curious to learn. It'll take you a long way. It'll take you a very, very long way.
100%. And I feel like a lot of our students need to hear this, that they need to reach out and not just wait for things to happen, but make things happen.
Got to make things happen.
All right. So can you provide some insights on how to use LinkedIn's job search and application features effectively for students? What do you think is the best practice when it comes to applying to jobs on LinkedIn?
Great question. And I think with LinkedIn, there's a few things to consider. First thing is try and come up with that list of companies. I could not recommend that more. Now, you can search for companies based on best places to work. That's how I found my first professional job, was by searching. There's a list here in Australia. It's a company that runs that basically ranks all the best places to work. I applied to them all, and that's how I found my first gig here in Australia. So definitely recommend finding that if you truly do not know what you want to do. But if you do know what you want to do, or you want to find grad roles or associate roles or whatever it might be, via the job search, you can search very simply. But I would take it a step further. Don't find a job just because it's the right job title. I would strongly recommend using LinkedIn to maybe find companies that you're a little bit more interested in from a vision match. And what I mean by that is on LinkedIn, we give you the ability to search for companies who are investing in certain pillars. So, for example, diversity, inclusion, and sustainability and things like that. So if you really want to work for a company that's wanting to maybe further, environmental sustainability, maybe start to search for those types of companies. Now, again, just a couple of little tips when it comes to that as well. You can create alerts. So definitely every company, if a new job pops up, you get emails straight away. On every single job, more often than not, there is a person attached to it. Now, that person might have the job title of recruiter. They might have the job title of something that's called a hiring manager, so essentially the person whose team you'd be joining. Reach out to them. I cannot stress that enough, that especially at the moment, how the job market is, you need to stand out. So if there's an angle or there is a way that you can reach out to that person, and it might be yourself, Prachi, and be like, hey, Prachi, look, I've got a few years of experience, but I'm looking to get into social media. Saw you've got this. How can I stand out? I know it's going to make your life a little bit easier, seeing someone who's really engaged, who's keen to learn a little bit more. These are the types of skill sets that we're interested in at LinkedIn when we're trying to find people. We're more interested in how someone's going to approach a problem. We don't necessarily want someone who knows everything, because we want that growth mindset. We really want that. Mm-hmm. And then the jobs piece as well, it's live all the time. I think I last checked, there's around about 20,000 jobs here in Melbourne just alone. So there's lots of opportunity out there. There's lots of ways you can set up alerts, searching for job titles, but critically as well, and something we've actually noticed a bit of a shift on LinkedIn, and a shift with even the partners that I have across Australia, is people are now trying to find potential candidates based on skills and not necessarily their job title. And what I mean by that is, you might have a hospitality, you might have been behind a bar for a few years, you might have been working in retail, whatever it is. But you've developed great skills, conflict resolution, communication, all these amazing things. So put those on your profile, and then you'll be interested to see the types of jobs that you start to match to. It might be something in customer service, it might be team leads, it might be sales, it could be a whole bunch of different things, because the skills you've learnt over the past 3, 4, 5 years being here in Australia means that it's not just a specific job that you maybe are qualified for. In fact, there's a whole world out there that your skill set now matches. So I'd strongly also suggest that maybe just expand your criteria just a little bit. Maybe be open to some jobs that maybe aren't 100% exactly what you're after, but maybe give you a pathway to go somewhere next as well. Because no one's career journey, and we talk about this a lot at LinkedIn, no one's career journey is linear. No one goes from being, it's very, very rare, and it's definitely changing. It is a very lateral, up, down, sideways. It changes all the time. And the older you get and the more you work, the more you realize people are figuring it out as they go, and use that to your advantage if you can.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned the shift, because I had no idea skills are such a focus now. I do have another question for you. For students applying for jobs on LinkedIn, there's an option for easy apply.
Yep.
Would you recommend, wherever it is optional to have a cover letter, would you recommend them writing a cover letter or not writing one?
It's $1 million question. I ask,
it really is.
It's tricky. I have asked recruiters all over Australia, and I reckon half of them say that they read them, half of them say they don't. But for those who do read them, that might be the critical element that they need. And someone who's written the cover letter has gone that extra step and has really put their reasons as to why they might want to join that company. They are tough. They're not fun to write, and it's tricky. They're time consuming. And if there is an option, personally, I would include it, because that's something that a lot of people do. Similarly, there's the option on LinkedIn that you can easy apply, which essentially just applies with your LinkedIn profile. Now, your LinkedIn profile might be terrible. And so if that's the case, then again, you're just a name, maybe a bachelor's, and no information, which if I'm sifting through 50, 60, 100 people, I don't know any information about you, there's nothing there, there's no cover letter for me to even glean as well, I'm probably not going to maybe take that further. But for those of you who do have a really fantastic profile, maybe that's the way to go. But it is the $1 million. It really is. But I think with every job application, sometimes we can fall into a bit of a trap into applying for maybe 10 or 20 every single day. And we're just easy applying because it's simple. It's 3 clicks, and that's great. But that might not necessarily mean you end up at the top of the pile. Your name might just get sifted through very, very quickly. So this is where if you can then attach a name, like a referral, hey, I've just met someone at the company who said I should reach out about this job, it goes, oh, hang on, this person's got a little bit more credentials, a little bit more something to this person. Maybe I can take that a little bit further. And that's where hopefully, LinkedIn can maybe get you to the door. We can't necessarily get you the job, unfortunately, but they can certainly maybe open up a few more of those interviews if you're finding that you're just getting absolutely nowhere with them.
I think that's a great point on how to stand out. And there's so many people applying for the same job. How do you stand out from that?
Absolutely.
Love that. So how do you think international students can leverage LinkedIn's educational resources? How do you think that can work in their favor?
Absolutely. It's a good question. Now, all of you will be studying, so you've got fantastic degrees from some amazing universities all over Australia. But LinkedIn, we have a huge library of online learning courses. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but we're actually owned by Microsoft. So we have certifications from, some incredible providers. And a lot of that content's free. I know just recently with the whole buzz around ChatGPT and things like that, I just did a certification from Microsoft about all things AI, and it's a free course that LinkedIn has put out with Microsoft's backing to help people understand how maybe ChatGPT is worth it. And I think where it becomes really interesting for potential employers, and again, if you're trying to find a job, if I'm stumbling onto your profile and I can see that in the last month that you've done 3, 4, 5 extended learning courses, maybe it shows me that you, this candidate, is really always trying to improve. They're trying to learn. And it's little things like that you can show your network, you can show a potential employer that you are constantly trying to improve, which I don't want to speak on behalf of every single hiring manager, but hiring for someone who's keen to always improve, always learn, and is coachable, something, again, we talk about a lot at LinkedIn, is absolutely gold. And it's very hard to sort of showcase that. You can't sort of say that in a cover letter, hey, I'm Angus and I'm coachable. Well, here's a history in the last month that I've gone above and beyond in my job. I have taken all these online courses to learn. And if you are interested in maybe making a pivot, you might have done a Bachelor of Science and been like me and have no idea where to sort of start. There's a link out there from LinkedIn. It's all about connecting to opportunity, and you can begin all these online learning pathways from incredible people all over the globe who have taught courses on how to, lead teams, on maybe how to jump into customer service, become a software developer, and it's free. It's actually incredible when you think about it, all this amazing knowledge that people are just sharing out there that you can jump on right now and have a bit of a look and then put it on your profile, which is really, really powerful.
Love that. I love that. I feel like a lot of students might not know about these educational resources that are available to them and for free. I don't think they would know about this, but I think they should look into it for sure, because that's how one of the many ways they can stand out for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much that we discussed. We discussed what a profile should look like, the importance of networking, and I feel like we have covered applying to jobs on LinkedIn. Now, coming to the end of our episode, if there was a single piece of advice that you'd want students to remember from this episode, what do you think it would be?
A single piece of advice. I think the best advice is you've got to, if you can, try and be your authentic self. When I was going through my process with LinkedIn, I actually reached out to someone on LinkedIn, asked them for a referral because it was a friend of a friend, and that's how I got my way to the door. But I interviewed with, he's no longer my boss, there's a guy called Rob Holtrop, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but he is Dutch, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but if you've worked or met anybody who does have a Dutch heritage, they can be quite blunt. And we're going through this process, and he asked me, what is one word to describe yourself? And I said, annoying. And what I meant by that is I work in a sales job, which means that as part of my job, I'm on the phone potentially a lot. I'm quite loud, and I like to maybe, stir things up, play music, all these kinds of things. And Rob, at the back of it, after he'd offered me the job and we'd started, he talked about how he's like, I really appreciated your honesty. I appreciated your authenticity when it came to that, because he'd interviewed a ton of people and everyone sort of talked about how they're hardworking and all this kind of stuff. And that authenticity, bringing that as part of your job, if you have to put up a wall and fake who you are, and it's so hard and it's so exhausting, and you're not giving yourself that opportunity to really thrive in that interview process, really thrive in that job. So if you can just be your authentic self, now that's much harder for a lot of people than it is potentially for me. But for those of you who can embrace that, I think it's really powerful. And further to that, if you can be your authentic self and then land that job because that company really wants to embrace who you are and not the sort of persona that you've created, I think it's going to take you a huge amount of places. And I think that's something that I've certainly taken it to everybody I work with at LinkedIn. We really try and create a space for people to really just be themselves, to showcase and talk about their stories, their history, their heritage, all those kinds of things, because all those add up to who you are. So if nothing else from this talk, if you've managed to get this far, just be your authentic self. And I think that that'll really serve you really well.
There's nothing more beautiful than being authentic, being yourself. And I feel like students have so much to take away from this episode. I really want to hear what students have to say about this episode on our Instagram, which is IDPAUS. But thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. I feel like students will learn so much from this.
No, thank you so much for inviting me on. Hopefully that helps.